The only photo of me at my daughter's wedding was the one they put on an easel at the entrance. Underneath it, a sign read, "Do not admit." They wanted to make a spectacle of me. They had no idea the real show was about to begin. And it was going to cost them $75,000. This is a story about the line between love and respect. If you believe dignity is non-negotiable, subscribe and let's walk through this together. I'm an architect. It's a title, a job, but it's really more of a philosophy. I spend my life designing things that are meant to last. Things with integrity, foundations, support beams, roof lines that can withstand 100 years of storms. You can't cheat physics, and you can't fake a solid structure. It's either there, or it's not. It's a code I've built my life and my business on. But my greatest project, the one I poured every ounce of my soul into, was never drawn on a blueprint. It was my daughter, Eva. After her mother, Clara, passed away 15 years ago, a part of my own architecture crumbled. Clara was the heartwood of our family, strong and beautiful. In the quiet, echoing rooms of the house I designed for us, it was just me and a heartbroken 10-year-old girl. Raising her became my life's work. I was no longer just building houses. I was trying to build a world for her. A structure of love and support strong enough for two. My masterpiece. So when she called me that Tuesday afternoon, her face glowing on my screen, I felt that familiar swell of pride. It was the same feeling I got when looking at a finished design. A sense of completion, of a job well done. She was happy. And for a father, that's the only metric that matters. Her joy was the proof that the structure was sound. "Dad, are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice bubbling with an energy that could power a small city. She had her mother's smile, wide and genuine. I leaned back in my leather office chair. The scent of drafting paper, graphite, and old coffee filling the air. My Portland office overlooked the Willamette River, and the afternoon sun was turning the water to molten gold. "I am now," I said, smiling back at her. "What's going on?" "Sweetie, you look like you just swallowed a firefly." She laughed. A sound like wind chimes. Something like that. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a dramatic breath and held up her left hand to the camera. A diamond, impossibly bright, sat on her finger. It wasn't just a ring. It was an entire solar system, catching the light from her apartment window and shattering it into a dozen tiny, dancing rainbows. For a moment, the world stopped. My little girl, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one who cried on my shoulder after her first breakup, was engaged. The breath caught in my throat. "Oh, honey," I managed, the words feeling small and inadequate. That's wonderful. It's beautiful." "His name is Harold," she said, her eyes shining. "Harold Kensington. You're going to love him. Dad, he's perfect." Then she turned from the camera, her voice muffled slightly. "Honey, come say hi to my dad, he's on video." And then he appeared on the screen. He didn't just walk into frame, he slid in, an arm wrapping around Eva's shoulders, pulling her close in a gesture that seemed both proprietary and practiced. He was exactly the kind of man you'd see in a magazine ad for a luxury watch or an exclusive credit card. Perfect teeth, a sharp jawline, and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. His smile was perfectly symmetrical, a flawless piece of engineering, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. As an architect, I notice details. I notice when the finish is perfect, but the underlying material is cheap. I notice when things are misaligned, and something about Harold was fundamentally, structurally misaligned. It's an absolute honor to finally meet the man who raised this incredible woman. See her, he said. His voice was smooth, polished, like a river stone. Too polished. Everything about him felt like a high-end render, not a real person. We made small talk for the next 10 minutes. Or rather, he talked. I asked him what he did, and he launched into a vague but impressive-sounding monologue about being a venture capitalist. He talked about tech investments, seed funding, synergy, and disrupting the market. He used a lot of words that sounded important, but they were like hollow core doors. They looked solid until you knocked on them. They were concepts without substance. I watched, fascinated and deeply uneasy. As he controlled the conversation, I'd direct a question to Eva, and he would answer for her. Eva, that's a beautiful painting behind you. Is that new? I asked, trying to connect with my daughter. Before she could form a syllable, Harold jumped in. Ah, yes, I picked that up for her. An up-and-coming artist from the Mission District. I have a real eye for talent on the verge of blowing up. It's all about seeing the potential before anyone else does. Eva just beamed, leaning into him, looking at him with pure adoration. She didn't seem to notice that she hadn't been allowed to speak for herself. I felt that cold knot in my stomach tighten. It was a feeling I recognized from my work, the feeling you get when you see a hairline crack in a foundation. Small, almost invisible, but a sign of deep, structural problems that could bring the whole building down. He announced he'd be flying to Portland the next week to meet me properly, to ask for my blessing in person. A traditional gesture I appreciated, but a day before his flight, he called me. Roman, he said, his voice laced with expertly crafted disappointment. You're not going to believe this. A last-minute emergency with my European investors. I have to be on a call for the next 6 hours. I am so sorry to do this to you. These things happen. Harold, I said, keeping my own voice neutral. But here's an idea, he said, his tone brightening instantly, as if he'd just solved a complex puzzle. Why don't you fly down to San Francisco next week? We can have a proper man-to-man talk. I'll book you a nice hotel. We'll do it right. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. He was shifting the meeting to his home turf, where he controlled the environment, the terms, the narrative. I knew it, but I agreed. I had to see the foundation this man was built on. I had to walk the site myself. We met at a dimly lit bar in a ridiculously expensive hotel in Nob Hill. The kind of place where the air itself feels expensive, heavy with the scent of old leather, wood smoke, and money. He was already there, nursing a glass of dark amber liquid. He stood as I approached, his handshake firm, his smile as bright and empty as it was on the video call. He ordered a 5-year-old single malt scotch for me without asking. Another power move. He was setting the pace, establishing the hierarchy. For an hour, he was the perfect son-in-law. He'd clearly done his homework. He asked about the library project I'd won an award for 10 years ago. He discussed the finer points of sustainable urban design. He told a charming, self-deprecating story about his first failed startup. It was a masterful performance. He was building a bridge of rapport, and I could see every carefully placed plank. Then, after the second scotch, he laid the final beam in place. The real reason for the meeting. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur, creating a bubble of intimacy in the quiet bar. "Roman, this is deeply embarrassing," he began, swirling the liquid in his glass. "And I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't respect you so immensely. You're a man of business. You understand these things. A significant portion of my capital is tied up in an international merger. It's temporarily frozen. Bureaucratic red tape. You know how it is." I just listened, my face a neutral mask. My heart starting to beat a little faster. "Here it comes. The thing is," he continued, his eyes full of earnest sincerity, "we found the perfect wedding venue in Napa. It's Eva's dream location. She fell in love with it the moment she saw it. But they require a substantial, non-refundable deposit to hold the date. $75,000. He paused, letting the number hang in the air between us like smoke. "It's just a cash flow issue. You understand? A temporary liquidity problem. I'll have access to my funds again in 90 days. Tops. But the venue won't wait. And I can't bear the thought of Ava losing her dream day because of some banking delay. It would crush her." He had done it. He had weaponized my daughter's happiness and was aiming it straight at my heart and my wallet. My mind was a whirlwind. Every instinct I had, honed by 30 years of assessing structures and people, was screaming, fraud. This was a script. Akon. And he was playing his part perfectly. But I saw the chessboard clearly. If I said no, he would twist it. He'd tell Eva I was cheap, that I didn't trust him, that I didn't support their happiness. He would use my refusal as a crowbar to pry Eva away from me. So I made a calculated decision. I would not give him a crowbar. I would give him a rope. "I understand," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "Family helps family. I'll help you out." Relief washed over his face. So quickly it was almost imperceptible. He had hooked his fish. "Roman, I don't know what to say. You won't regret this. I promise." "Oh, I know," I said. "There's just one condition." I leaned forward, mirroring his posture, and looked him directly in the eye. "Eva is not to know about this. Not a word. She would be mortified to think we were discussing money behind her back. And I don't want her to start her marriage feeling like she's in debt to her old man. This is a gift from me. To you. To handle things. It stays between us." He agreed instantly. "Of course. Absolutely. Between us men." He thought I was protecting Ava's feelings. Or perhaps my own pride. He didn't understand. I was protecting the evidence. I was creating a secret, a piece of leverage. And I was setting a trap. "I'll mail a personal check to you tomorrow," I said, taking a final sip of the expensive scotch. "I don't do wire transfers. Too impersonal. I like having a paper trail for my records." He nodded, a triumphant glint in his eye. He thought he'd won. He thought I was just another old fool, easily charmed and easily parted from his money. I flew back to Portland the next morning. The sky was gray and heavy, matching my mood. I went to the bank, the teller greeting me by name. I got a cashier's check for $75,000. It felt heavy in my hand. Like a stone, I mailed it from the post office, the thud of the package dropping into the bin echoing in the quiet building. For 2 days, a profound sense of dread settled over me. I'd walk through the house I'd built for Clara and Eva, the home where I'd raised her, and feel like a stranger. The check wasn't just money. It was a $75,000 bet on my own intuition. And I was terrified that I had just betrayed my daughter in the name of protecting her. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in my office. The plans for a new community center spread out on my drafting table. But I couldn't focus. The lines and measurements blurred into Harold's perfect, empty smile. I had to know. I couldn't just sit here and wait for the damage to be done, for the cracks to spread until the whole structure failed. I opened my laptop. The screen cast a pale blue light across the dark room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, then moved with a grim sense of purpose. I didn't search for his company. I didn't look at his social media. I pulled up the website for an airline. A round trip to San Francisco. Leaving tomorrow. Returning the day after. I didn't tell Eva I was coming. I told myself it was to look at the wedding venue, to be the supportive father, but I knew, deep down, as I clicked Confirm Purchase, that I wasn't going there as a father. I was going as an architect, to inspect a faulty foundation before the whole house came crashing down. The flight from Portland to San Francisco is short, just over an hour and a half. But that morning it felt like a transatlantic voyage. I was suspended between the gray skies of home and the unknown truth waiting for me in California. I didn't look at the in-flight magazine or accept the coffee. I just stared out the small window at the vast quilt of clouds below. My mind a storm of its own. An architect works with facts, with tangible materials and hard numbers. For the first time in a long time, I was flying headfirst into a world of pure speculation, and the feeling of being unmoored was terrifying. I had Harold's business address from the signature on his emails. Kensington Ventures. Floor 12. 499 Mission Street. It sounded impressive. A solid address in the heart of the financial district. I took a cab directly from the airport. The city's famous hills rolling by outside the window. The air was different here. It smelled of sea salt, ambition, and exhaust fumes. I felt like a foreigner in a land my daughter now called home. The building at 499 Mission was a sleek tower of glass and steel, a monument to new money. I walked into the lobby, my sensible leather shoes feeling out of place on the polished marble floors. The directory in the lobby was a glowing touchscreen. I typed in Kensington Ventures. The screen blinked for a moment before displaying a simple, cold message. No results found. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I walked over to the security desk, where a guard sat looking bored. "I'm looking for Kensington Ventures," I said, keeping my voice casual. "On the 12th floor." He glanced at his monitor without much interest. 12th floor is a Regus co-working space. "Sire, you'd have to check with their reception up there. But I ain't heard of no Kensington Ventures." I thanked him and took the elevator up. The doors opened onto a trendy, open-plan office. Young people in expensive sneakers were typing on laptops at communal tables. The air smelled of burnt coffee and whiteboard markers. It wasn't the headquarters of a venture capital firm, it was a corporate flophouse. A place for people to rent a desk, and the illusion of a real office. A young woman with bright pink hair sat at the reception desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "Yes. I'm here to see Harold Kensington, of Kensington Ventures." She finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. She typed the name into her computer. Her expression didn't change. "We have a Harold Kensington, with a hot desk membership, but there's no company registered under that name. He's not checked in today. You want me to leave a message?" "A hot desk membership?" I asked, the words feeling foreign. "Yeah. He pays a monthly fee." He can use any open desk when he's here. He doesn't have a private office or anything." She was already looking back at her phone. The conversation clearly over. I stood there for a moment. The cheerful hum of the office, a stark contrast to the roaring in my ears. Harold didn't have an office. He didn't have a company. He had a glorified library card that allowed him to pretend he did. The entire foundation of his professional life, the one he described with such confidence, was a complete fabrication. It was a facade. A cheap set piece designed to impress. And I had just paid $75,000 for a front row seat to the play. I left the building and walked, not really knowing where I was going. The city felt different now, sharper and more dangerous. Every smiling face seemed like a mask. I needed more than a suspicion. I needed proof. I needed a blueprint of his lies. I found the San Francisco Public Library, a grand old building that felt more solid and real than anything else I'd seen that day. I found a quiet corner, logged onto their public computer, and paid for access to the legal databases. My hands were trembling slightly as I typed his name into the search field, Harold Kensington. The first result was a civil case from 2 years ago. Cynthia Reed v. Harold Kensington. The charge was fraud and breach of contract. I clicked on the case file, my heart pounding against my ribs. I read Cynthia's deposition. She was a recently divorced doctor. She'd met Harold on a high-end dating app. He'd swept her off her feet, told her he was a venture capitalist, and convinced her to invest $50,000 in a guaranteed tech startup. Once the money was transferred, it disappeared. The case was settled out of court. He'd likely paid her a fraction of it back to keep her quiet. My blood ran cold. It was the same script, the same character. I kept digging. Another case. 3 years ago. Maria Flores Quinto. Harold Kensington. This time, it was for $60,000. Maria was a widow who had just sold her family home. He'd promised to invest the money for her. He'd vanished. Another settlement. Then another. And another. It was a pattern. A career. He wasn't a venture capitalist. His venture was collecting the capital of lonely, successful women. I felt a wave of nausea. He wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. He sniffed out vulnerability and turned it into cash. And I, in my desperate attempt to protect my daughter, had just become his latest and greatest investor. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that made me physically recoil from the screen, came from a different kind of search. I found a private Facebook group, a support network called Bay Area Dating Scammers, Survivors. It was a long shot, but I requested to join, writing a brief, anonymous message saying I suspected a family member was involved with a con artist. A moderator approved my request within 20 minutes. The page was a wall of heartbreaking stories, a digital tapestry of betrayal. I used the group's search function and typed in his name. Dozens of posts appeared. Some were angry warnings. Others were tearful accounts of financial and emotional ruin. They all described the same man, charming, attentive, successful, and utterly ruthless. They described his stories of frozen assets, his vague business dealings, his talent for making a woman feel like the center of the universe right before he gutted her life savings. Then I saw it. A post from 6 months ago by a woman named Sarah. She had posted a photo. It was a picture of her hand, and on her finger was an engagement ring. A beautiful, distinctive ring with a central diamond flanked by 2 smaller sapphires. It was the exact same ring Eva had shown me on the video call. The air left my lungs in a single, painful gasp. It wasn't a symbol of his love for my daughter. It was a stage prop, a tool of his trade, passed from one victim to the next. My daughter wasn't his future wife. She was just the next actress in his long-running, one-man show. I sat there in the silence of the library, the screen glowing in front of me, and felt a grief so profound it was physical. I wasn't just grieving for the money. I was grieving for my daughter's stolen dream. I was grieving for the fact that I had raised a smart, wonderful woman who could be so completely and utterly fooled. And I was grieving for the part of our relationship that I knew was about to die. Because I couldn't let this happen. I had to tell her. I walked out of the library and back into the harsh California sun. My mind made up. I found a quiet park bench and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. The architect in me had taken over. I had the blueprints of his lies. Now, I had to present them. I called her. She answered on the second ring. Her voice bright and happy. "Dad, hi, what's up?" "Eva," I said, my own voice sounding strange and distant to my ears. "Honey, we need to talk. I'm in San Francisco." "You are? Why didn't you tell me? We could have had dinner." "This isn't a social call. Sweetie, I found some things out. Some things about Harold." The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by a defensive chill. "What are you talking about? What did you do?" "I just did some research." "Eva, the man is not who he says he is. He's a con artist. He's done this to other women. Many other women." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. Then, a cold, hard laugh. "Oh, my God. I can't believe you. Harold warned me you'd do this. He said you'd be jealous and try to find something, anything, to ruin this for me. He said, you can't stand to see me happy with someone else." "Ava, this isn't about jealousy," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "This is about facts. I have court records. I have stories from his other victims. He's a predator." "Stop it," she screamed into the phone. Her voice, shrill. "Just stop. I don't want to hear your lies. You're the one who is lying." "Not him. You're trying to control me. Just like you've always tried to control me." "That's not true. And you know it," I said, my own voice rising in desperation. "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need your protection," she shot back. "I have Harold. He protects me. He loves me. Something you've never understood." The cruelty of that statement struck me silent. I had no response. "I don't want to talk to you anymore," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "And another thing, don't come to the wedding. I don't want you there. You are not invited." The line went dead. I sat on that park bench for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear. Listening to the dial tone, the city bustled around me. People laughing, cars honking, life going on. But my world had ground to a halt. My daughter, my masterpiece, had just disowned me. She had chosen the lie because it was beautiful, and rejected the truth because it was ugly. With heavy hands, I did the only thing I could think of. I opened my email. I attached the links. I attached the screenshots of the court cases, the PDFs of the depositions, the anonymous but damning stories from the Facebook group. I attached the picture of Sarah's hand, with my daughter's engagement ring on it. I wrote a single sentence in the subject line, "The truth," and I sent it. I waited for hours in my hotel room, staring at my phone, hoping she would call, hoping the evidence would be undeniable. But the only response I got came late that night. It was a text message. I showed Harold you're pathetic. Photoshopped evidence. He's not even angry. Just sad for you. Our wedding is in 2 weeks. Do not come. If you show up, you will be removed. I read the message 10 times. The words blurred through the tears I could no longer hold back. I had laid the foundation of truth, solid and undeniable, and she had chosen to build her castle on quicksand. A few days later, after I had returned to the hollow silence of my home in Portland, a package arrived. It was a small, heavy box. Inside, nestled in white satin, was a silver picture frame, and in the frame was the photo of me that Eva had asked for a few months ago. The one she'd said she wanted for her wallet. It was my favorite picture. Taken on a good day. I was smiling. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a small, embossed card. The handwriting was Harold's, "So you can be there in spirit. Best. H." It wasn't a peace offering. It was a victory lap. A final, cruel twist of the knife. He was mocking me. He had taken my money. He had taken my daughter. And now he was taking my own image and using it as a trophy. I looked at the smiling man in the picture, and I didn't recognize him. He was a ghost from a life that no longer existed. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my empty house, the grief inside me began to cool, to harden, to change shape. It was no longer just sadness. It was becoming something else, something cold and hard and sharp, something that felt a lot like resolve. He thought the game was over. He had no idea it was just beginning. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. They passed in a kind of gray, silent limbo. The beautifully framed photograph Harold had sent sat on my mantelpiece. A constant, smiling monument to my own foolishness. I didn't move it. I left it there as a reminder. Every morning I'd look at it while I drank my coffee, and every evening it would be the last thing I saw before turning off the lights. The smiling man in the picture was a ghost, and I was determined not to become him. I went to work. I reviewed blueprints. I met with clients. I went through the motions of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. On the outside, I was the same Roman, the same methodical architect, but on the inside, a demolition was underway. The part of me that was a father, the part that would do anything to shield Eva from pain, was being carefully dismantled. Piece by piece, it was being replaced by something colder, something harder. An architect knows that sometimes the most compromised part of a structure has to be torn down to save the rest of the building. There was no contact from Eva, not a text, not an email, not a single word. It was as if the last 28 years of our lives had been erased. My check, I saw from my bank account, had been cashed. The $75,000 were gone. Harold had his money. He had my daughter. And in 2 weeks, he would stand up in front of all their friends and family and formalize the acquisition. I thought about not going. I thought about staying home, nursing my wounds, and letting the day pass like any other. But the image of that framed photo, that mocking gesture, wouldn't let me rest. It was a challenge. It was a declaration that they had broken me, that I was irrelevant, a ghost to be pitied. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I could not let that stand. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to shout or cause a disruption. An architect doesn't work with chaos. He works with structure. And I was going to show them what happens when you compromise the very foundation of a deal. On the morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn. I showered. shaved, and put on my best suit. It was a dark charcoal gray, custom tailored, the one I had planned to wear to walk my daughter down the aisle. Putting it on felt like donning a suit of armor. I didn't pack a gift. The $75,000 had been my gift. Now, it was my weapon. The drive from Portland to Napa Valley is nearly 10 hours. I did it in one go, stopping only for gas. I didn't listen to music or the radio. I just drove. The steady hum of the engine, a monotonous companion. The landscape of Oregon, lush and green, slowly gave way to the golden, rolling hills of Northern California. It was beautiful, but I saw none of it. My focus was singular, my purpose clear. I arrived in the late afternoon. The wedding was being held at a sprawling winery, a Tuscan-style villa set amidst endless rows of grapevines. It was breathtakingly beautiful. A perfect stage for a perfect lie. I could see the fleet of expensive cars in the parking lot. I parked my own rental car at the far edge, under the shade of an old oak tree, out of sight. I got out of the car and straightened my tie. I could hear the faint sound of string music drifting on the warm afternoon air, punctuated by the gentle murmur of happy voices. For a single, agonizing moment, the father in me resurfaced. My little girl was in there, dressed in white, about to start a new life. A wave of profound loss washed over me, so intense it almost buckled my knees. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her it was all a terrible mistake. Then I remembered the framed photograph on my mantelpiece. The resolve returned, cold and absolute. I began to walk toward the entrance, not to the main villa, but along a gravel path that led to the garden where the ceremony was being held. I kept to the edge of the property line, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. And then I saw it, positioned right at the archway that led into the garden, where every single guest would have to pass was a large, ornate easel made of dark mahogany, and on that easel was a blown-up, life-sized portrait of the photograph Harold had sent me. My smiling, friendly face, welcoming guests to a wedding I was explicitly banned from attending. But that wasn't the worst of it. They had placed a velvet rope in front of the easel, the kind you see at a museum or a nightclub, creating a barrier. And on a small, polished brass plaque on the easel, engraved in elegant script, were the words, "In loving honor of the father of the bride, Roman, we know you are with us in spirit." It was the most exquisitely cruel thing I had ever seen. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It wasn't a do not enter sign. It was worse. It turned me into a pathetic tragedy. A sad story for the guests to whisper about. "Oh, that's her poor father. So sad he couldn't be here." It was designed to publicly humiliate me while making them look like magnanimous, loving children. They hadn't just barred me from the wedding, they had turned me into a prop in it, a piece of the scenery. I saw a few guests I knew, old family friends, walk past. They saw me standing there. Then their eyes would flick to the portrait, then back to me. Their faces a mixture of pity and extreme discomfort. They didn't know what to do. They just hurried past, their eyes averted, as if my grief and humiliation were contagious. That was the moment, the turning point. An architect can analyze a structure for weaknesses, but it's the moment of collapse that tells the truest story. And in that moment, something inside me collapsed. The last vestiges of a heartbroken father gave way completely. The pain was still there, a white-hot point in the center of my chest. But it was no longer in control. It had become fuel. The noise of the wedding, the music, the laughter, all of it faded into a distant hum. My world became silent, sharp, and perfectly clear. They had made their move. Now, it was my turn. I didn't say a word. I didn't cause a scene. I simply turned around and walked back the way I came. My steps were steady. My purpose absolute. Each crunch of gravel under my shoes was a countdown. I got back into my rental car. The leather of the seat cool against my back. The silence inside the car was a sanctuary. I took out my phone. My hands were perfectly still. I didn't have to look up the number. I knew it by heart. I called the private client line for my bank. The one reserved for long-time customers. A woman with a calm, professional voice answered. Harris Private Bank. This is Sarah speaking. How can I help you? Mr. Miller. Hello. Sarah. I said, my voice as calm and professional as hers. It's Roman. I need to execute an immediate stop payment on a cashier's check. There was a soft clicking of a keyboard on the other end. Of course. See you. Do you have the check number? I do. I said, it's number 7,251. The pay is Harold Kensington. The amount is $75,000. I had memorized the details. An architect leaves nothing to chance. One moment. Sire. She said. More clicking. Okay. I see the check. It was cashed 2 weeks ago. But the funds have not yet cleared settlement. They are still in transit. I can place the stop. Is that what you wish to do? Yes. I said, effective immediately. Very well. Sire. The stop payment order has been placed on check number 7,251. The funds will be returned to your account within 1 business day. I am sending you an email confirmation as we speak. A notification pinged on my phone. An email had arrived. The subject line read, Confirmation. Stop payment order processed. Thank you, Sarah. I said, you've been very helpful. My pleasure. Mr. Miller, is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, a strange sense of peace settling over me. That's all. I ended the call and looked at the email. I read the words over and over. Order processed. It was done. The demolition charge had been set. I knew how these things worked. The vendors, the caterer, the florist, the band, they would all deposit their final checks at the end of the night or first thing Monday morning. The venue's final payment, the largest chunk, would be processed based on the validity of that initial deposit. By morning, when the bank systems updated, that $75,000 foundation would turn to dust. The notifications would start rolling in. Bounced checks. Insufficient funds. A cascade of financial failure. The beautiful house they had built on my money was about to collapse on top of them. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see the winery, glowing in the late afternoon sun. A perfect picture of a perfect day. But I knew it was just a facade. And the wrecking ball was on its way. The long drive back to Portland was different. The 10 hours passed in a state of calm clarity. I still didn't listen to music. But the silence was no longer heavy with dread. It was filled with a quiet, cold satisfaction. I was not a victim. I was an architect, and I had just redrawn the plans. I got home well after midnight and slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I was in my kitchen, making coffee. When my phone rang, it was a Sunday. The caller ID showed an unknown number from the San Francisco area code. The first tremor. I let it ring for a moment, then picked it up. A faint, knowing smile touched my lips. Roman speaking. The voice on the other end was a woman's cry set. High and tight, with a professional veneer that was cracking under pressure. There was a frantic energy just beneath the surface of her words. The sound of someone trying to keep a lid on a boiling pot. "Mr. Miller, Roman Miller," she asked. A little too quickly. "This is Eleanor Vance. I'm the wedding coordinator for the Kensington wedding." "I know who you are." "Eleanor," I said calmly. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The rich, dark liquid was a small, solid point of reality in a world that was about to become very unreal for a lot of people. "Sir, there seems to be a problem with the final payment deposit," she said, the words tumbling out. "The check from Mr. Kensington. The one for the venue and catering balance. Our bank just notified us that a stop payment was issued. It's been declined." "I see," I said. The two words were perfectly neutral, carrying no hint of surprise or satisfaction. They were simply a statement of fact. There was a pause on the other end. She was clearly expecting more. An explanation. Perhaps. An offer to help. "Sir," she said, her voice now losing its professional edge and tipping into outright panic. "This is a very serious situation. We're talking about a significant amount of money. The vendors haven't been paid. The winery, they're threatening legal action. Mr. Kensington isn't answering his phone. I was hoping, since you were the original issuer of the deposit check—" "Eleanor," I interrupted, my voice still quiet, but now with a hard, immovable edge. "That sounds like an issue for the groom to handle. My financial involvement with that event has concluded." "But sire, the contract is with Harold Kensington," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Not with me. I suggest you direct your calls to him. I'm sure he has a perfectly reasonable explanation." And with that, I ended the call. I placed my phone face down on the granite countertop. The first domino had fallen. I knew it wouldn't be the last. I had barely finished my coffee when the phone began to buzz again. And again. And again. A relentless, frantic vibration against the stone. I didn't pick it up. I watched the screen light up with a series of unknown numbers from the Napa and San Francisco area codes. The florist, the band, the photographer, the aftershocks of the earthquake I had started. I let them all go to voicemail. They were not my problem. Then, a new notification appeared. A text message. My heart gave a painful lurch. The name on the screen was Eva. I picked up the phone. My hand suddenly unsteady. The message was short. All caps. Riddled with typos from a person typing in a rage. "Dad, what did you do? The wedding planner is calling me. She says the money is gone. Fix this. Now." I stared at the words. The entitlement. The blind accusation. There was no question. No concern. Just a demand. She was still his puppet. Speaking his words. I felt a pang of the old, familiar grief. But it was distant now. Like an echo from another room. I did not reply. A minute later, another text came through. "Are you serious? You're going to ruin my wedding day. My honeymoon. Because you're jealous, I can't believe you. I hate you." Then another. "Harold is freaking out. You've destroyed everything. Everything. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I read the messages, and I felt nothing. It was like reading a weather report from a distant country. The storm was happening, but I was no longer in it. I was in the calm, quiet eye. I placed the phone back down on the counter and finished my coffee. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended peace. I went to my workshop in the back of the house. The one place that was truly mine. The scent of cedar and sawdust was comforting. I ran my hand over the smooth, unfinished surface of a cherry wood table I was building. I worked with my hands, focusing on the precision of the joints, the grain of the wood, the solid, dependable reality of the physical world. My phone continued to buzz intermittently from the kitchen. Prua frantique. Dying insect. I ignored it. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across my lawn. When I heard the sound of a car pulling up my driveway too fast, its tires skidding on the gravel. I heard a car door slam with enough force to rattle the windows. Heavy, frantic footsteps pounded up the stone path to my front door. Then came the banging, knock, a furious, desperate pounding, as if someone was trying to break the door down. Boom, boom, boom. I put down my sanding block, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked calmly through the house. I didn't rush. I knew who it was. The storm had arrived at my doorstep. I opened the door. Harold stood on my porch, a wild, cornered animal. He looked like he had driven straight through the night. His expensive wedding suit was deeply wrinkled. His tie was loosened, and his perfect hair was a mess. His face was a blotchy red, his eyes wide with a feral, sleepless panic. The charming, polished mask was gone, shattered into a million pieces. This was the real man, the weak, terrified fraud who lived underneath. "You!" he screamed, his voice hoarse. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You senile old fool, you ruined everything. You have to fix this." I stood in the doorway, not moving an inch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet was my strength. "There's nothing to fix." "Harold," I said, "I simply stopped payment on my check." "My check, that was my money. You gave it to me. For the wedding, for Eva." "No," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "I gave you that money under false pretenses. You are a con artist and a thief. The money was never yours. It was always mine, and I took it back." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. Speechless for a moment, he had expected me to be scared, to be intimidated. He didn't know how to deal with this calm, immovable object standing in his way. You can't do that," he finally sputtered. "I already did," I replied. "What you do with your creditors is your business. It's called responsibility. You should look it up sometime." His rage suddenly collapsed, replaced by a desperate, sniveling panic. He saw that threats were useless, so he changed tactics. He tried to use his last remaining weapon, my daughter. "Please, Roman," he begged, his voice suddenly pathetic. "You don't understand. They're going to sue us. The venue, the caterer. They're going to ruin us. Think about Eva. She'll be humiliated. Her name will be dragged through the mud. You'll destroy her. Is that what you want, to destroy your own daughter?" I looked at this pathetic man, this hollow shell, and I felt a profound, final clarity. He was still trying to play the game, still trying to manipulate me with my love for my daughter. He didn't get it. He never would. "I'm not the one who destroyed her." "Harold," I said, my voice low and final. You did. You destroyed her when you lied to her. You destroyed her when you isolated her from her family. You destroyed her when you put your stolen ring on her finger. The humiliation she feels now is the consequence of your actions, not mine. She will be hurt. Yes, but she will heal. And she will do it without a parasite, like you attached to her life. His face crumpled. He knew he had lost. There were no more moves to make. The game was over. Now, I said, my hand moving to the doorknob, get off my property before I call the police. Unlike your business ventures, they are very real. I slowly, deliberately, closed the solid oak door in his face. I didn't slam it. I just closed it. The latch clicked into place with a soft, final sound. The sound of a chapter ending. I heard him shout my name once more. Adespérate. Pathetic cry. And then the sound of him stumbling back to his car. A few moments later, his tires squealed as he sped away. I leaned my back against the door, the solid wood cool against my shirt. I closed my eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. It was over. The storm had passed. In the weeks that followed, the silence was profound. I didn't hear from Eva. I didn't expect to. The news of Harold's spectacular implosion trickled back to me through a few old family friends who called, cautiously, to see if I was all right. The wedding had ended in chaos. The honeymoon was, of course, canceled. Eva had apparently locked herself in her apartment and was speaking to no one. About a month later, I was reading the news online when a small headline from a Bay Area news site caught my eye. Serial romance scammer. Arrested in Arizona. I clicked on it. There was a grainy mugshot of Harold Kensington, looking tired and defeated. He'd been caught trying to pull the same scam on a wealthy widow in Scottsdale. The article mentioned his recent, disastrously failed wedding in Napa and cited it as the event that had finally led to his downfall. As multiple vendors had filed fraud complaints, he was being extradited back to California to face a dozen charges. The system had caught up with him. My check hadn't just been a tool of revenge, it had been a catalyst for justice. I felt a quiet sense of vindication, but new joy. The victory felt hollow without my daughter to share in the truth. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was a simple white envelope, addressed to me in Eva's familiar, elegant handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a long letter. There was no apology, no explanation, no angry tirade. There was just a single sheet of paper. On it, she had written one sentence. Dad, do you still have the old blueprints for the treehouse you promised to build me when I was little? I read the question over and over. The treehouse, a silly, forgotten dream from her childhood. A project we had planned together, sketching it out on napkins at the dinner table. A secret hideaway just for the two of us. It was something from a time before Harold, before the lies, before the money. It was ours. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. It was a fragile, tentative, first step onto a bridge she was trying to build back to me. I walked back to my workshop. The letter in my hand. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the floating dust motes like tiny golden stars. I looked at the half-finished cherrywood table, at the neat rows of my tools, at the orderly, structured world I had built for myself. I hadn't lost my daughter. I had given her a chance to find her way back. Not to me, but to herself, and that was a foundation strong enough to build on. The check was stopped. The wedding was a disaster. The liar was in jail. But for the first time, in a very long time, the architecture of my life felt sound again.